one, live. Welcome, everybody. I'm more nervous than usual today for those of you who have seen other tea shows, but it might be because I'm sharing a table with a bunch of accomplished women in the party, and I'll introduce them all to you. I'll start off with Adriana. She is a member of the provincial legislature in Gauteng. Then we've got Sandy, who's the DA Gauteng North's Dawn Chair. And then to my, this is left, no? Yeah. To my left, we've got Lebo. Lebo is DASO TUT's chairperson. And then we have Mpo, which is our DA Gauteng North chairperson. So for those of you who don't know, the DA in Tshwane is called the DA Gauteng North. That's why we continue speaking about Gauteng North. We've got some live chats going on, so if you want to pose questions, you can pose them. The team will send them to me on my cell phone, and we might answer them during the time that we are going on. So we are purposely around this table today to discuss what in 2021 and after recent lootings and last year's COVID and how all of that has influenced women, and also how we have got women with different walks of life having different issues and different challenges and obstacles that we need to face, and how we can all come together and take hands in building a better South Africa for women specifically. Because in our earlier discussions, Mpo actually mentioned that we need to pioneer and we need to champion women. Now, I myself grew up in a very small town in the Free State, and this was during apartheid years. I grew up quite sheltered to a number of things. Now, during my adulthood and getting involved in politics, I started experiencing and understanding much more what South Africa is about and what being a woman in South Africa is about in different places. And somebody who's been to pretty much every corner of South Africa, and from rural areas to informal settlements, I spent a couple of weeks ago on Facebook, spent some time reading a story that a woman wrote, and it touched me very, very much. It was about a lady who lives in an informal settlement. She doesn't have a toilet in her house. There's only a street toilet that she needs to walk to. Now, we all know that this exists. We all know that it's there, and we all know that it shouldn't be like that. But the way that this lady wrote it humanized it to me into such an effect that I suddenly understood. And she explained how she was pregnant, and then she needs to use the toilet a lot. And how at 3 o'clock in the morning she has to wake up in the winter, get out of her house and walk down the street just to use the toilet. And then there was the high mast lights wasn't working, and it was dark, and the experience that she had walking down that street knowing that she is pregnant, and she was then actually raped that the one night as well while being 8 months pregnant. And even though I knew all of these things were reality, the fact that it was put down in those type of words and explained exactly that, her real emotional journey was explained in this, almost made me think, as a lady from suburbia, that my challenges means less. But at the same time, a couple of days after that, I had somebody break into my own home and came into my own bedroom. So now at night, I need to know that I'm also not safe in my own house and in my own bedroom. So I want to start off with posing a question to Adriana first, you, and then Sandy. I would like you to come in from a Dawn perspective as well. But does the fact that there's inequality of opportunity in South Africa, does that nullify or minimize the obstacles that certain women are facing in suburbia based on the experience that the lady in the informal settlement has?
It's a very good question, and I would like to think it does. Take it from myself, where I stay, women alone. you also, and I want to agree, security and safety in our town, in our province, is really not up to standard. We are not secure, even if you can have an alarm system linked to a security company. And I think this the same with the women in an informal settlement. Yes, I worry about an alarm system. She worries about walking out at night to go and go to the toilet. So Jackie, yes, for me it's definitely so. We're actually in the same boat, and I earlier mentioned that, you know, as an Afrikaner woman, growing up in a very male-dominant household, you learn to become, you know, obedient to the male in the house. And I think for the township lady, girl, it's more of a challenge. I think the traditions there are quite strong still. And we were earlier discussing that going forward, the emancipation of women, to empower each other, to mentor each other, will bring us on the same level. So yes, inequality has been, you know, something that's been hindering the progress so far. But for myself, I am totally keen to one day, before my grandchildren is grown up, to be in a position where I can say, we got it right.
Sandy?
Yes, thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Adriana. Happy Women's Month to all the women in the city of Tshwane and the country as a whole. Yes, I agree with you, Adriana. I agree with you, Jackie. It's a matter of us presenting each other with opportunities. For me, I consider myself one of those fortunate women from a township, previously grew up in a rural area, and I mean deep rural, to be presented an opportunity to serve and to serve women, and not only as the chairperson for women but as a councillor. So also I felt that the honors lied with me when I realized my circumstances, what women go through in the rural areas or in the township. What can I do to better that? Obviously I had to be the change that I wanted to see. So I started with you, expressed and exposed myself to opportunities, networked with other women, and make sure that I bring the desired change that I can actually communicate as a testimony in the living rural and the township women. So basically from where I'm coming from, it's even easier to say, okay, as women in the township or in the rural area, how do we take the process forward? Because I have been exposed to opportunities, I know what is needed, but obviously we'll probably even need a plan in terms of how do we emancipate each other. Because yes, to be honest with you, to be a woman in South Africa, it's actually one of the most dangerous things that we're living in. And we need to actually find also a way of protecting and nurturing the girl child. I'm glad we have a Dasso here as well. How do we elevate? Because earlier on you mentioned something very important about the 51% of women who were affected during COVID. But now also, how do we make sure that it doesn't affect the student graduates as well? How do we make sure that the women in the township, those who are at universities, even amongst ourselves, get exposed, and then we come out of this whole, I don't want to call it a hellhole, but it's actually where we are at right now. So it's amongst each other, and I'm also of the philosophy of what Mpo said, that we are each other's keepers. So if I have been given this opportunity, I need to be obviously set platforms where I make sure that people in my capacity, or those who live in rurals or in townships like myself, are also exposed to these opportunities, and obviously it starts with me.
So you said it, and I'm not sure how many people know this, but lockdown and the jobless factor that came with lockdown affected women much more than it affects men. And specifically, 51% of black women were left unemployed. And in South Africa, a lot of our breadwomen winners are women. So this left us a couple of weeks ago with looting in South Africa, where you saw footage of a woman going into a grocery shop and getting food for her family, and that fed into the greater agenda, which we now know was at place, of a possible attempt to a coup. And so was the inequalities that women face amongst each other, because some of us have much more opportunities than others, but also from us to men, does that leave us vulnerable for political manipulation and for us to be used as a political tool? We know that throughout centuries, women has always been used as a political tool for men to reach the goals that they want to. If we just look at South Africa, the women's suffrage movement in South Africa for women to get a vote, that they promised, the government at the time, or the governing party at the time, promised women that if they vote for apartheid, they will get voting rights in South Africa, or if they persuade their husbands to vote for apartheid, they will get voting rights in the next election. So women were actually used to vote against other women. And I almost feel as if at this point in time, women are again being used as political tools because of the situation where we've left it. Mpo, I would like to have your opinion on that.
Thanks, Jackie. My point of departure will be, I am my sister's keeper. That is my point of departure. But let us look at what has happened in the past few years. Women are delegated, if you want to call it that, to being housekeepers. And that is where our issue came from. This is where our issue came from. Because there are housekeepers, and then when they are, what do you call them? The people that are employing them.
Emancipated.
Yes,
Those are the
Yeah.
people.
Yeah,
Yeah, when the people are there,
their employers.
their employers. That's the word. Hey, English is running away with me today. But you
I'm
have
very
to forgive me.
Afrikaans, so I get it.
Then they lose their jobs. And I think all of us have seen that. But we've got another situation that is happening with our men. Our men are in construction, they are in development, and so on and so forth. Hence, they could retain their jobs. So, what do we need to start talking as women? We need to start talking about what legislation are we going to put in place to secure the rights of women. Earlier, when we were talking, we talked about women as MMC of housing as well, women having houses. Let's talk. Let us talk about that, because in the event that I've got a woman who gets chased out of her house because the husband has got a house, I've got a problem, because that is a mother and children that are on the street. What are we saying then as government? We are not moving forward, we're moving backwards. Let us start having those conversations to say, if a mother can have a house, chances are the mother will not chase the children away. Chances are, even if the marriage or whatever it is goes sour, the children will be housed. We've got a problem, and we need to start having those conversations. Until we start having those conversations and we start changing the legislation, I still maintain we're hypocrites in stilettos. And I think I've got stilettos.
Yeah. So, Lebo, you as a student, you obviously see that most of the graduates are women. But then once they've graduated, they get into that situation where Mpo just spoke about. So from a student female and as a student woman, how do you see this conversation going, and how do you see us resolving that issue?
Firstly, let us also not forget, I think it was Sandy who pointed out that 51% of black women are unemployed right now due to the current pandemic. We have a situation of a pandemic that women who are mostly breadwinners are retrenched from work. And then still, that does not stop the graduation of female graduates that are coming into the work field, wanting to occupy those jobs that women are now being retrenched from. So it becomes a competition amongst ourselves as women. And then you ask yourselves that if so many women, 51%, which is majority of women, are unemployed at this point, what makes you so sure that as a graduate you are liable enough or you have access to getting employment? These are things that we as students worry about, and I'm really happy that I'm sitting in a panelist of women in council, because of I feel that if there are maybe mentorships, that they can create opportunities for young graduates as ourselves, and not only that, but for unemployed women. These are discussions that we should be having with our fellow council mothers, because we do look up to you guys. As we see you now, there's a young girl sitting there wanting to be the next Adrian, wanting to be the next Sandy, wanting to be the next Jackie, the next Mampo. These are things that we should be talking about, that from now on we should start mentorship girl childs, that from this age we give them the necessary tools to occupy those positions. They must take up space.
That also comes with projects like eradicating hunger and
Yes.
in ensuring a place of zero poverty, which is something that the DA feels quite passionate about. I mean, we've got our economic justice policy. So, Adriana, there's just a comment that came through, and I think or a question that came through, and I think it falls in quite nicely with what we are saying now. And it says, the question is directed to yourself, Adriana, and it comes from a lady in Amanskral that asks, how can you, with your seat in the provincial legislature, ensure that we get to that point where, you know, a young woman can enter a life and know that they will be in a position where their own choices matter, they are able to look after their own family, and they can see their own destiny and decide on their own destiny and where they end up. So, but the question here specifically, how you, as a woman with a seat at the table in legislature, can make the change.
Thank you so much for that question, and the lady from Amanskral, thank you for taking the time. You know what, I live by a saying from the very young activist, Pakistani activist. Her name is Malala Yousafzai. She was the youngest person ever that won a Nobel Prize for women education, and she said, if I raise my voice, it's not because I want to shout, it's because I want to ensure that those without a voice are heard. We cannot progress, we cannot be successful if half of us are left behind. So I wanted to mention that because that's my whole, you know, philosophy and why I am there. It's a massive responsibility for me to sit there. It's a massive honor also to sit there and to know that people out here or out there, where my constituency in the Pretoria North area, trusted me enough to put me in that position. We have seen how the Premier has driven the township entrepreneurs, the bill that is still in progress after more than 2 years. And what worries me often is that women gets a job and it's kind of a tick box exercise. Yes, tick, we gave 20% of the job to a woman. And that shouldn't be the case. That's what my gut feels tell me. If you are worth it, you deserve it. That's what I always say. So for me, it's mentoring. You know, as women, sometimes we blunt. We're gatekeepers. We're scared of competition. You mentioned it earlier, Lebu. You know, I'm the only one in this boardroom amongst the whole team of men. I will not allow my sister to come in and be my competition. And that's where we are wrong, where we are our own biggest enemies. Because we need to be bold enough to trust ourselves enough so that we allow other women who's got potential to enter our space, to also experience what we experience and also contribute. And that will empower, and that will make the change that we as women so badly need.
And if I may come in,
Yes, please.
Jackie, yes, we do acknowledge that we constitute 52% of the population, but we must also create a balance. And whilst we try and elevate each other, we mustn't forget that we also have a boy child.
Yep.
I'm talking about this as a mother of boys and also as a Dawn chair, because whilst we are each other's keepers, but we also have boys. If you look at the percentage of the boys that are in the street, well, the people that are in the street, it's a boy child. And it's very important that whilst we want to elevate women, we must also create a balance.
Absolutely.
What must happen to those boys? And also, as women, we are seen as mothers, and it also needs to start with us. So the mentorship and the programs needs to strike a balance so that the boy child is not left out.
Comment while you were speaking now, comment just came through here from a lady in Pretoria East that says we must not teach a boy not to hit a girl, we must teach a boy not to hit.
Yes.
Amen.
Because why does it matter whether it's a boy or a girl?
Yes.
No? So that was just a comment that I thought was interesting based on
and
what
to
you just
actually
said.
add on the comment, violence against women is not the problem. Violence itself is a problem.
Exactly.
Being it the girl hitting the boy child, it is wrong
Yeah.
on both fields.
Mhm.
No, there is something that I read, I think it was a year or so ago, that says, as a woman, do not stay in a relationship that you would not want your daughter to be in. But also train your son to be the man that you would be proud of. So I think where we're talking about violence against women, it comes back to training. And Lebo is saying it very clearly. No fighting at all. Whether it's against a woman or a man or whatever, it should not be done. But we as women, we've got that responsibility. But also, what one of the things that we need to talk to is, how do we stay in relationships we have no business staying in as women? We need to start talking about it. Because in the event that I stay in a relationship where I'm getting abused, that's what my children are going to learn. At some point, you need to go for the sake of your kids.
But that's what brings us to quite a difficult situation. Is as our laws say that we are equal, we've got a number of the that act that says that you're not allowed to discriminate against women. But in practice, that is most often, or very often, not the truth. A woman can be well trained. I mean, if I look at myself at the moment, okay, so I was quite a successful woman in my career. I met my husband and gave up my career because I wanted to have a family, and I personally want the opportunity to raise my own kids and to be there for my kids. And for that, and obviously that's not a choice that all women make, but that was my choice. And but I had to give a very lucrative career up in order to be in that position to do so. So should heaven forbid it happens that my husband, who's a fantastic man, I'm really blessed, but should it happen that him and I should need to get a divorce for whichever reason it is, I have given up 10 years of a career. And there's no way that I would never ever be in that position again. I mean, even if he should pass away now, and I remember this is one of the biggest fights my husband and I had, was I was very adamant on the fact that he should get life insurance. And he was, but why do I need to get life insurance? She's just going to marry again, and then your new husband is going to use the money. But that's sort of, yes, I see the cameraman laughing. That's also because he knows my husband. But in any case, I mean, but that's the reality. But I fought for it, and that's something that I stood on, is because I will not be able to maintain the lifestyle for my kids that I am maintaining now, should I not be in this relationship anymore. And that's something where a lot of women sit. You sit, and it's not about having a fancy lifestyle and fancy shoes. It's very often in South Africa about having food on the table.
Precisely.
It's about the ability to feed your children, and that's very often where we sit in. And for us as women with with the seat at the table, and Sally, I'm going to throw this question to you. Us in local council, what can we in local council do to prohibit a woman with a degree? I mean, she studied entered the job market for a year or two, but then left. What can we do to ensure that she does not get into a position where in 10 years' time she can't leave her husband because she can't put food on the table? And this even happens to educated women.
Amen.
So what can we do in local council to ensure that?
Now you're talking sustainability, because from where I'm sitting, I'm also passionate about the development of youth. So, how do we elevate our youth in a way, generally so? I think personally, as a woman and a person who has been very active in women businesses, I think we do have policies in place. We do have a UN policy that speaks of what is just us now, Jackie, but you also have a constitutional policy. We have a ministry in the presidency that talks about the issues that we're addressing now. And for me, it's like a vicious circle. Every year we're talking. When are we implementing?
But isn't
those
that up to
programs-
us though?
It
I
is.
mean, we're sitting here. I've got a seat at that table.
Yes.
And we've been saying around this table today that we should, these are things we should talk
Yes.
about, these are things
Yes.
that we should do things about. But we are the women that should do something
Yes,
about.
as policymakers.
We are the ones
yes.
who are the policymakers,
Yes.
and we're also the ones
Influencers.
doing the oversight over those that needs to implement our policy.
Absolutely.
I mean, we and none of us are from Parliament here, but it is still practiced today that if you get married and you do not want to take your husband's surname, a lot of the people at the Home Affairs, they give you your husband's surname, whether you want it or not.
No,
And
let me give you
yes.
a very practical example. So when I wanted to change my name to Metabisi, I was told by Home Affairs, I have to get my husband's permission. And I'm like, for what? I've divorced with this man. But women are still subjugated and we are still being harassed by the system. If I want to go change my surname, I don't need my ex-husband to come and say, yeah, no, it's correct, no, it's not correct. What are they putting us in?
And it's not policy, but that's what practically happens on the
That's
ground.
accepted.
It's accepted, and it's accepted practices. I know when I got divorced from my first husband, I'm still married to the lovely guy I spoke about earlier. When I got divorced from my first husband, I wanted to change my surname back to my maiden name. I couldn't get that done because they refused at Home Affairs. In the end, I asked them for a form for a name change. So they gave me a form for a name change, so I filled it in and boom, I got my maiden name back. But they didn't just want to turn, to change it back, although all policies allow for that. No, these are the type of things that means
Yes,
those.
I just need to come in. I wanted to address something to your earlier question, Jackie. Back to the justice policy. I'm very passionate about that policy. I read that over and over and over again. The question of how do we make sure that labor stays in the same job and it's elevated 10 years later. We need to not make labor to be dependent on another person or the state. That conducive environment that makes labor flourish. Why can't we have programs that taps onto labor skills? To say, okay, labor is an travel and tourism student, and how do we make sure that labor one day runs a labor tourism company? Then labor makes sure that tomorrow in my township there's 5 more girls, 5 more boys that would actually flourish and then go through this, well, maybe not the same process, but obviously be presented with opportunities, not the same as labor, but conducive, whereby they will be elevated in such a way. But also, when I said we needed to strike a balance, we must also embrace the laborer and the educated. We have a generation, well, not necessarily a generation, but a group of people that never went to school, but they're hands-on, they're laborer. How do we complement them as well? Most of them are youth, maybe even old. Those are the skills that we need to nourish. We need to make them known. And yes, as policymakers, we're responsible to make sure that we bring them to the fore. They are known that there is a Sillo who's a woodworker, and Sillo can design the best furniture shop after Bako's brothers. So let's make sure that as policymakers we have action plans that talks to those things. Maybe survey our environment. Make sure that we bring all those skills shortages, because I know we also have a skills shortage in South Africa. Why do we always have to go and source? Right now we're still debating the Cuba and whatever, everything that needs to be sourced from Cuba. Why can't we have our own Cuban? Because I believe we do have capabilities. So as policymakers, we need to make sure that those policies that are put in place, they talk to every environment, urban, rural, township, and then we complement one another. We present people with that conducive environment, and then we make them accessible to funding, and then that's how the economy will grow as well.
Yeah.
Jackie, ekskuus, ek gaan net inkom net 'n bietjie Afrikaans ook ingooi. En jy laat my spontaan dink aan die 4de industriële revolusie. Nou werke wat gister en laas jaar nie bestaan het nie, bestaan vandag. So ons uitdaging is, hoe kry ons jong mense so vinnig geleer dat hulle cyber security specialist kan word. They can become big data analysts. Those jobs didn't exist a year prior to where we are today. Can you see the opportunities? Kan jy sien wat se geleenthede as ons dit raak sien, as ons die wil het om die verskil te maak? En des te meer is vroue aan die voorpunt daarvan. En Jackie, ek weet ek en Ryan het lekker gesprekke daaroor, want hy ken nogals daai veld. En hy verras my altyd met sy inligting en hy help my ongelooflik, en dan voel ek net, maar ek wil dit vir die jong mense gaan vertel, want die opportunities in terme van fourth industrial revolution skills, and it's here, it's not tomorrow, it's not in 2025, it's here today.
But I'd also like to add on, it's not a point of me disagreeing, but it's a point of seeking clarity. Because as much as there are more opportunity, the fourth industrial revolution has brought more opportunity, but it has taken some. Because what's happening now is that everything is digital, right? Now what happens to the printing companies?
But here's the thing, with regards to what Adriana is talking about. And I'm one person from an IT perspective. I do believe this is the way we are going to go. Question, do we have the necessary skills? We don't. That is my problem. That is, I think, a problem that government needs to address. You're talking about security. We had an issue with, what's his name? David something, when he was a minister of security cluster, where they stole 15 million. How does that happen? It doesn't happen. It cannot happen. But that is a situation that we as South Africans were faced with. Now, if ever we are going to talk about security, which is for me is integral to the sovereignty of our state, we don't have the skills. And what's her name? Kima Mutsech. She'll tell you about maths and science and maths and science. We've got a very serious problem at this point as a country. We need to address that.
Well, yes, that is indeed so, and I believe that the issues that we have, and as I said to earlier, often any of these issues affects women before it affects men. The corruptions which leads to job losses, etc. It often affects the women in our society first. Now, very interesting is that the United Nations train women to be peacekeepers. They train women to, when there is war, for the women to go in and be the peace negotiators. Because they believe that, and it has been shown, that if you've got a woman to go in to do the negotiations, the results are much often more favorable. So when I was lucky enough to go through one of their trainings, and while we were trained, they pointed out a very interesting thing. In South Africa, one of our biggest challenges is that we have an inequality between employment between men and women. However, our percentage of women in SAPS is the highest in the world. We have the highest amounts of female law enforcers of all countries in the world. Yet we sit with the high levels of violence that we are sitting with. And yet we sit with, although we've got very much trained, women in different fields, we do not sit with women employed in those fields. So clearly our women are fierce. Clearly we are fearless. And we have Dicoledi that just joined us. Dicoledi is also an MMC in the city of Tshwane. And Dikoledi, I know you're quite passionate about it. If you can maybe show your arm to the camera. A woman's place is in the struggle.
It is.
Exactly, and I mean that's where we should be. And clearly, our women have the heart to be in the struggle. But why are we not making it a success? Why do we still sit with this great, and let's call it a pandemic against women in this country? Why do we still sit there?
And I think the reality is that there's so much of patriarchy that still exists. There's so much of cultural practices that still force women to submit to certain practices. And because of that, and women not being allowed to be educated, chances are in every household where there are even 5 children, the oldest female will be asked to stay at home and look after the younger ones, where her brother, who might be the same age, will be allowed to go to school. And that is where the difference actually starts from, is there. And you also look at how many young women are not able to go to school because it's that time of the month and they don't have sanitary pads. And we drive the sanitary pads issue, and I think it's been exhausted to the point where it's just become another thing that everybody jumps on, but we're not making the right steps. And I think it's not just about educating the girl child, and I think MMC Mekhape spoke as well about maths and science. What's happening with IT and the 4th Industrial Revolution when I came in? We're not getting enough women to go out and be programmers and to go out into fields that they would never generally go into. When you advertise even in roads and transport for any position, the majority of the people that apply are actually men. Because in technical fields you don't have women, to the point where you have to say at some point you don't want to use a quota system, but you need to have enough gender representation, because I've seen that women get things done. And even in the taxi industry, if I send them in to go and negotiate as officials, they come back and it's a stalemate. But if I go and do it myself and call bluffs sometimes where it's necessary, then men actually are like, okay, we'll do this, so we'll agree. And you ask yourself, why aren't women given themselves those opportunities? And patriarchy also goes to a point where women are policed for the most menial of things that men would not actually have to go through. We always have to be considerate of our presentation, but how angry we get. And if we get angry, we're called emotional. Whereas a man will be seen as he's in charge. He has an understanding. He's in control.
He's a man.
He is a man. And those are the unfortunate realities that we live in. And where you always have to toe the line. And I think even with women being in a leadership position, every time you need to ask yourself, am I reacting emotionally to the situation? How can I react better? Maybe I shouldn't use these words that a man would most get away with, you know? Where you as a woman, if you use it, you're like, everybody is shocked. So you kind of have to restructure and kind of play out how particular meetings and engagements are going to happen before they actually happen. Just so that you are seen and treated as an equal, as a professional in any industry.
I'd actually like to just jump in, but it's a question that I pose to all leaders in the panel. Whereas you get a situation where you were just, Dikoledi was just talking about that mostly the girl in the house has to stay while the brother goes out and looks for a job or gets educated. Now what happens to this girl now grows up and becomes a woman. Can be someone's woman, can be someone's wife, has her own kids. Now the husband is now violating her. Let me just say abusing her. She has no skills, has no job. Her duty is just to take care of the woman. The husband is now the breadwinner. Now she has kids that she has to look after. Should she now get the husband arrested, in which is, it's mostly in our justice system, we look at the perpetrator, we look at the offender, but we never mind what happens to the victim. Yes, he can get arrested, but now he was the only source of income. What then now happens to this woman?
Well, we need to, sorry, but we need to start wrapping up. So I'm going to let you say what you want to say, and then I'm just going to make some more comments.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to come to what you're saying, right? Yes, she finds herself in a particular situation, but until women make a decision, we need to make that decision, and that is our problem, because we're looking at the father of my children, the husband, and so on and so forth. Almost says some weird words that she would normally say. But what we need to do as women, we need to start. One, is this even conducive for me? Two, am I setting a good precedence for my children? If none of those is yes, leave. You have to come to a point where you leave. But there's something else, Dikeledi, that you were touching on, but we did not expand on this. Ne? When I talk to women, I always say, you need to stand by yourself. Yes, we're talking about men that abuse you. We're talking about men that leave you. But we never talk about the man that dies. We never talk about it. If I have to rely on my husband, whatever it is that I have to rely on, if he dies tomorrow, what am I going to do? And hence it is important for women to stand up on their own. You have to get yourself a job. It might not be the best job, but you need to get yourself a job. And maintain yourself and tell yourself, in the event that this man goes, I'm able to rise on my own. Because we've got issues like that. And it seems those are not some of the issues that as women we try to address. Thank you, Jackie.
Lady, you wanted to add on?
I wanted to add on to the question asked, and the reality of the matter is that you have so many women who are in abused relationships. But even as society, we take the perpetrator out of the home, but we never look at how's the woman going to be skilled. We don't have skill centers for women where they can find employment. But as well, you look at a lot of women movements. A lot of women movements are actually very classist and very elitist. We do not actually look at women who are underprivileged. So we will go and speak to women who also have a level of privilege and appeal to them to live abusive homes. But we don't necessarily go to the woman who says, like Mpo said, goes and fishes water from the river, stays at home, is in an abusive relationship. For a woman like that, where there aren't skill centers in those areas, there aren't shelters for those women, that woman is not going to leave. We are expecting the impossible because we are not there giving them the right options to be able to empower themselves and as well their children. And I want to say that, you know, even to women my own age, that listen, if you have a child, know that whatever you go through and abuse, your child is going to mimic exactly that. Your child is going to love men and be with men who are will treat it exactly how you were treated, because they grow up being accustomed to that. It's normal.
Precisely.
We normalize what we're not supposed to, even as parents and women, because of circumstances, and we don't realize that we are creating a cycle in a generation of more young girls and women who are going to be in exactly the same position afterwards.
I'm mother to a daughter. You love my daughter?
Absolutely.
I'm also mother to a son, and the camera boy loves my son. So, and for my own choosing is that I've chosen to be a mother first, and I've, as I said earlier, left quite a lucrative career. And throughout all of this, in some way, I found myself becoming a public representative, which was not planned, but in any case, it happened. And then I fell pregnant. And everybody said to me, you can take maternity leave. It's open for you. You can take maternity leave. But then I could not carry my proxy over to somebody else in council. So if I took my maternity leave, my constituents did not have a voice in council.
Yes.
because I am a counselor.
Yes.
So just because I am a woman who chose to become pregnant, my entire constituency loses their voice. I think that's also where sometimes we need to stand up, and both Sandy, both you and I have done it. Is to decide, hello, but we're not going to take on maternity leave. We're not going to do this. And my daughter was 2 weeks old, and I sat in a council meeting with her on my lap. I was thrown out of the council meeting, but she was there, and I casted every vote that I have to cast. And sometimes we just need to say sorry. And you know what was the worst? Is that most of the people that gave me problems with this was the women in council. I mean, I sat in caucus meetings breastfeeding my daughter, and the men would continue with the meeting, and the women would stop.
Yeah.
That often happens.
Women
So
are oppressive.
now we're in the position where both you and my kids are there, and because your daughter's about a year younger than mine, I think. We both of our kids, because we're the only ones in caucus with young kids, with both of our kids are there, and we've overcome that where it was initially extremely frowned upon. I was having to chair a public meeting a while ago, and that was the day my house was broken into, so I had to take my kids with me to the public meeting. And while I was speaking, the mayor was looking after my son. No, he was entertaining my son, and some of my other colleagues was looking after my daughter. And so we've broken that from where initially I was sitting and people were fighting with me and chasing us out of meetings, to the point where now it's an embracive situation. And we also need to, as women, and as you have also just push through. And there's no laws against this, so why do we stop ourselves from doing that? Why do we stop ourselves from standing up? And I think that is maybe where, as a panel, we've all met each other today to say that it is about taking your own power, about standing up when you need to stand up, and about also us, yes, changing the laws and changing the policies, but also about us having that courage to stand up and to do what is frowned upon, and to do what others do look down, and culturally would not want us to do. So unless there's any other comment from the floor, I think yes.
I just need to say this.
Yes.
As I said it earlier, we need to be our sisters' keepers.
Exactly.
There is no way that we're going to change the legislation, the rules, until we come together, and then we have that focus to say, if a woman is pregnant, for example, what needs to happen? She cannot be sidelined because she's pregnant. We need to come to that, and as women we need to start having that conversation, but importantly, not above and having that conversation, but we need to stand together to say, this is what we are going to do.
And support your sister when she stands up.
That is why I remember when she was pregnant, that one, and she said, how long is my maternity leave? I said, as long as your doctor gives you. I was the deputy chief whip at that time, and I said, whatever the doctor gives you, that's how long your maternity leave is. And I was willing to back that up because she had C-section, and she was not going to come back next week. We have to start, but we have to start not only having those conversations, but we need to start standing together.
Exactly.
I think last one from me is maybe we mustn't even focus too much on the negative and also talk about the positive. To say my time in council, maybe the getting in was a bit difficult, but obviously I came in when I was pregnant, but the welcoming was very warm. I was flexible to do anything. I had no pressure from anybody to go to council and not to go to council. So that's why I had the flexibility to go in. I remember I was at the last council on Friday. I was on Thursday, Friday I was giving birth. So, and then coming back, it was that time where we had the on and off and they needed the numbers. So I had to decide that I need to be there because my proxies needed what you've mentioned of the proxy. But anyway, on the issue of what we've just addressed, just to summarize everything from my side, I believe, we have spoken, we have picketed, we have the policies, but let's have the plan, let's have the implementation. How do we influence those policies that we must implement? I love the fact that our party is the only party that's got the highest numbers of women and youth as public reps. And I think that's a good start. But how do we make sure that we include more, more of those youth, more of those women, and maybe even take a different turn to say, Labour must come in and work as a tourist officer for 5 years. After 5 years, Labour must have a startup to start Labour's tourism company.
So look how proud she gets. She's like, yes, I want that.
And I know I'm a graduate now. and my first entrepreneur is to Tanzania, please.
Thank you.
My first mission.
Not only that, but
And
I'm
it's
actually
less than 10,000.
I'm actually very happy that in a panel such as this, I see such variety, also in age group. So it shows that we're not stagnant, we're moving forward. And I was very happy, I think it was on one of our WhatsApp group chats. I'm like, wow, another one. I think she was a peer counselor. She was very young, Umpongobe, and I was like, wow, there's another one. I see it was also our former DASO activist, Moses. And I'm like, wow, 1994, another one. It makes it possible that with us, we're like, wow, it's actually really possible. We can occupy those spaces.
And I think from my side, when it comes to these issues, is for us as women to be mindful, even in our own decision making, and how we are our sisters' keepers, that we do not also become the guardians of patriarchy. Because sometimes, as from the discussion and a lot of what Jackie has said, is that women at times, we are actually the ones that keep patriarchy alive, and not necessarily the institutions that we work in, and not necessarily the men that we work in, but it's because we were raised in ways that something is frowned upon, and we still want to keep those standards because that's what we are taught to believe, without realizing that we are oppressive. We oppress other women as women, and if we can be mindful of that, then it will change a lot of how we approach situations and how we interact with other women, and understand that women, and I think this is the whole thing as well of being a liberal, is that everybody is individualistic. Everybody has a sense of self, and we need to always remind ourselves to guard that this is important. This is how important is. If important decides to speak out about this issue, that's going to be her issue, and I'm going to support that. Not on the basis just that she's a woman, but on the basis that that is something that might not affect me today, but might affect me 5 years from now, and might affect the next generation of public representatives that will be coming in. And if I don't stand with it today, I'm actually setting in stone a precedent that will be very difficult for the next generation of leaders to actually break.
Exactly. And that's why we are launching today a competition for everybody out there, and I'm challenging all the women to nominate their superwoman. Somebody other than themselves who have influenced their lives or has influenced the greater world. So I want to invite you to nominate the superwoman in your life, your colleague, your mother, your sister, whoever it
my mother
might be.
counts.
Your mother counts, yes.
And she can nominate me.
And you can nominate each other, but nominate your superwoman. Nominate a woman that have made a positive impact in your life. And I think we'll leave with that. So let's make that our Women's Month challenge. And then I just want to say thank you to Portuguese Art Gallery and Tea Garden that hosted us today and gave us some eats and drinks. Happy Women's Month.
Happy Women's Month.
Thank you.